I'm Christy Hartman. Welcome back to my channel. We're going to do a resist. We're going to use the Liquitex string gel. We're going to use 3 different prints. These are all botanicals. So I did a little auditioning. Yeah, this will make a fairly nice resist. So I'm going to start with this one. And this is a new stencil of mine from PM Artist Studio. This is a wildflower. And I don't know if this is style 1, 2, or 3. I'll figure it out and I'll put it in the description. But let's use our string gel. We're going to use a palette knife. Try to keep the string gel off of your hands. It is kind of a pain to get off of. And let's just go right over the top. And I'm going to try to work quickly because the string gel wants to go underneath my stencil. That'll have to dry for at least 24 hours. I'll do the other 2 off camera. I'll be back in a bit. I grabbed another gel print. Here is another one of my wildflower stencils. I don't know if this is style 1 or 2 or 3. I'll link it in the description. Now you do want to get this off of your stencil as soon as possible because it will stick. Okay, that looks like I got good coverage. Let's add our top layer to this resist. And we're using this gold. I think it's Kuretake. It's a Japanese calligraphy gold. Looks like this. We're going to do 2 coats on this. This first coat will just coat the paper. And the ink should adhere to the paper. It will resist where we had the string gel. Yeah, okay, let's put a second coat on this. Now this will make that flower really pop. And I'm going to let this one sit for just a minute. Yeah, it's coming off better. So my recommendation is to let him sit for just a minute in between applications. This one is just an old print that I also did a brayer off on. So I think this will work. So let's try this. Let's take our string gel and our palette knife, and I'm not going to use very much. We cannot see it right now. I can get a hint of it, but I'm going to let that sit and dry. I'm using just regular Deco Art acrylic craft paint. And this is my first coat that I'm going to add to this print. And I begin to remove that paint too soon and decide that that isn't going to work. This is another print that I've added string gel to. I'm adding my first coat of black paint, same Deco Art black paint. This time I find that this paint removes easier than I was finding with the previous print. Put a second coat on it, and I find that this one actually removes rather nicely. Again, I'm using a dry paper towel. Now I begin with this print that was on the brayer off, and I'm trying to remove the paint that I've added to it, and it's not coming off. I'm kind of struggling with it, so I go back to the previous print and I'm able to remove that easily. But this one, I'm pulling the paint off all around the string gel, and I'm now using a baby wipe to see if I can pull it off, but I just tend to pull the paint off all around it. So this one was not a very successful print. I'm not entirely sure why, but I wonder if it was because it was a brayer off. Maybe the paint was too rough to be able to remove it easily. I'm not sure. Well, that one is not working. Not sure why it's not working, but it's not working. Can't get the paint off of it. Might have let it dry too long, but I also dried this one with my electric dryer, and that may have set the paint into the string gel. Not sure. So this one is a disaster. Yeah, it's not a disaster, it just didn't work. It's coming, but it's taken the paint right with it. Let's compare this Sumi ink, which is black, to the black paint. There was some gold on this paper, so I'm going to try adding this black high flow over the top of it and see what happens. Alright, I'm removing this paint. It's still a little damp. Well, I didn't think that the Sumi ink worked particularly well, so that's why I added the high flow. And I think that the high flow is going to be more opaque than that Sumi ink was, and darker. Okay, I've got most of the paint off of there. That one I think looks good. So I'm trying black Sumi ink on this one, and I've got one coat on here, and so far I have not been impressed with it. And the problem is that the gold that's on my paper is resisting the ink. The ink doesn't have enough paper to be able to get down into, but I thought we would try a second coat on it and see what happens. The gold paint is actually resisting the ink, which is kind of a cool idea. Let's just take it off there and see what's happening. Yeah, so that didn't work. This resist process has definitely been a journey, and I've discovered some interesting tips and tricks about the process. I've done all the hard work, which means you don't have to. I mentioned in one of my earlier videos that I couldn't find any information when I began doing research based on this technique. And so I started from square one. I had a friend who was also doing resists, and we compared notes, and she gave her suggestions, and they were very helpful. But what I discovered is that this isn't an exact science. So I want you to give yourself the leeway to make mistakes. Remember, it's only paper. Let me share some of my observations on what worked and what didn't. First of all, I learned that this process is not foolproof. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. When it doesn't work, maybe it's based on your weather, more so than your materials. Maybe it's based on the materials. String gel is a very fluid medium, and less is more when you add it to your piece. I prefer a palette knife to spread my gel. You may find something else works better for you. I used papers which had plenty of unpainted areas. I found that that worked better for me. These were with the gold Kuretake ink. I thought these worked really well. 2 coats of the gold ink seemed sufficient. Less than 2, I felt it was just too light of a coat. And I actually thought those were really beautiful. But I thought, as is the case with most techniques, what if? So I did some stamping with black paint on this print because I wanted to see how it would look. I thought they were kind of plain on their own. Then I used black Deco Art paint, which has a matte finish to it. I thought it worked really well. And then I tried one with adding some gold stamping to it, which I liked. And then, of course, if you will recall, I used the golden high flow over the top of the Sumi ink because the Sumi ink didn't work, which the high flow has a much higher gloss sheen than did the Deco Art paint. So that's just a little bit of a comparison for you. This also has gold stamping on it. I thought it worked just fine. Then, of course, don't throw out your mistakes or less than satisfactory pieces. You might be able to resurrect them in a future print, just like I did on this one. Ink versus paint. I found various paints worked better. A more fluid paint was optimal. It didn't work for me to try to resist on a gel print that had, first of all, multiple layers, and secondly, had gold paint on it. The gold paint resisted all of the paint that I put over the top of it. Any clear media which is spreadable will work. Just remember to check if it dries clear. So a clear gloss gel would work just fine. I didn't prefer one media over the other. I found that the gold Kuretake ink actually was easier to use, but this also worked particularly well. The black Sumi ink I was not terribly happy with, but maybe another brand would work better. And I hope you'll try this technique and let me know what you think. Thank you for joining me. Leave me a thumbs up. Leave me a nice comment. I always love to hear from you. And I'll see you in my next video.